So before we get started with this steering gear, this one came off of 98 Cherokee, and I'm not having so much of an issue with this. Like I mentioned before, maybe it's more on this side. It's more on this feels already tight. It's just the steering wheel feels spongy. So in order to do these adjustments, you need to drain the steering gear. And so what I did was I left it upside down, leaning against somewhere, so that you can get all of the oil out. And I left these off. I just put them on so they wouldn't get any dust, but I left these off so that it drains out in a container or somewhere. And don't attempt to do this with a bunch of oil in there, because your measurements are not going to be right. So leave it off for a couple of days, or maybe do it on the weekend. And if you really need to, once you rotate this the shaft back and forth, it basically acts like a pump, because it will shoot out oil from either side. So that will help a lot more. So what I did initially was go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you're going to hear some gurgling, and it'll continue to spew out oil out. But don't just assume that just because you did it for 10-15 minutes that it'll get all the oil out. There's still a significant amount of oil inside the gears, so it would be really helpful for you to just lean it against somewhere, let the oil drain all the way down, and then work on here back and forth, get it out, and then do that throughout the day, and then plan on doing it the next day, not that same day, because it takes a while for all the oil to come out. And if you do it with the oil inside, your measurements might not come out, and it might be a complete waste of time if for some reason you don't get the measurements right. And once you install it and come to find out that it was just a complete waste of time. So it's just better to let it drain as much as you can, and then that way there's no oil when you take the measurements later on. So just keep that in mind. So before you take off this locking nut, it's fairly easy to just pound it off. Make sure that you make a nick or a marking. I made mine with the Dremel right here, and make sure you have a reference point as to where it was before you took it off. That way you have an idea on how tight it was, and that way when you put it back on, you have some kind of clue as to how tight you're putting it on. Because if you don't, then you're just really guessing as to how tight it is. And if you put a nick on here, you can at least put a reference point for yourself afterwards. So mark in the locking nut, put a little mark, and then also put a little mark on the steering gear itself. So there's a mark here, there's my mark right there. And then that way I know that when you put it on, it has to clear that spot for it to be as tight or tighter than before. Because even though it says on the book, at least for mine, that it's supposed to be 80 foot-pounds, it's probably next to impossible trying to gauge any amount of foot-pounds, especially when you're just pounding it with a hammer. So hope that helps. Alright guys, for all of you that have gone into YouTube and have listened to the advice of others, where they say that if you have a power steering gearbox and have adjusted this and it didn't work out for you, even though adjusting this part right here does help a ton if your steering box is pretty worn out, what it will not fix is a spongy feeling that comes from this side on the steering wheel. So no matter how much you tighten this, if this is loose, then you will always have a spongy feeling on your steering that could be as small as a 1/4 inch or as big as, I want to say, an inch. That was my case. So just adjusting this part didn't help any, because the issue is over here. And so I'm gonna attempt to show you guys what I think would help a lot, and hopefully it'll help some of you. I have not found any videos online, and there was another guy I'm gonna try to post where I started doing this, from another guy that gave a very small but confusing explanation, and I would have liked if he would have done a video. And if he does a better video than me, then awesome. But here's my attempt at helping many of you that aren't able to get rid of that sponginess that comes from the steering wheel side. So what happens is, when you tighten this part tightens up and it feels decent, but you still end up with a sponginess on this side. And the only way to fix the sponginess on this side is by removing this part, which this is the lock nut that goes in here, and you have to tighten it to 25 or 30 foot-pounds. And the tool they use right here, it's a pain in the butt, because you can get some off of Amazon, but it's tricky getting to that. So I built my own, which is this, and it actually centers into that. Can you see the 2 pins that are coming out? And this way you can tighten it to the 25 or 30 pounds, depending on which box you have or where you get the information. This one I did it to 25 foot-pounds. Then after that, you have to make some markings. Let's see if you guys can see it. And I just made them so that later on I can adjust the sum. So here is 25 foot-pounds, and this is 30 foot-pounds right here. So you're supposed to make a marking that is, at least for my case, this came off of 98 Cherokee XJ. At least for me, it's supposed to be 0.20 inches, which is roughly a 1/4 inch. So I made a marking behind the 25 foot-pound mark, back a 1/4 inch. So that's where you're supposed to back up the hole that was on this side. When you tightened it, then you need to back it up a 1/4 inch to match this marking right here. And after that, you can put in your lock nut. And again, that one, when you tighten it, at least for my box, it's supposed to be 80 foot-pounds, but it's next to impossible to gauge how many 80 foot-pounds are. So in my case, what I did is, before I took off that piece, I made another marking right here of where it was positioned. That way, when I put it back, at least I know that when it hits that mark, it's very tight. Now you can go past that mark or before that mark, but at least you have somewhere of a reference point as to where that locking nut it's supposed to be at. Because if you keep pounding that, you might ruin it, or you might get it under torqued. So basically what I did was, wherever the end was, wherever it hits right at the end, that matches that mark, that nick mark right there that I did with the Dremel. And then that way you'll have a pretty good idea on how tight it is. But anyway, so here you go, what I used here to be able to put in the tool that measures the drag, the center off drag. Which is this tool right here. You can get it off of Amazon, and it measures from 0 to 80 inch pounds. So don't get confused. inch pounds, and you're only going to be measuring from the 0 to 10 mark, which isn't the most accurate because technically 20% below and I believe 90% and above aren't accurate. But honestly, unless you get one of those very extremely expensive tools that are hundreds of dollars, this is probably your best bet off of Amazon. So basically what you do is, and I hope some of you are mechanically inclined enough to do this, which many of you are, is you get your socket wrench and then you rotate it, and it's basically three rotations, but you have to make sure where you start, and you're going to do 1.5 rotations. So if you start up here, you would go 1, and then once you get up here, this would be 1.5 rotations. And pay attention to where the flat part is on your steering box, and in my case, my flat position ends up on the top. Looks like that. Oh, and if I forgot to mention, this is a 17 millimeter socket that might go in easy, or now you might have to tap it in there to get it to fit, and it has to be a 12 point, otherwise it's not going to work. And make sure you tap it in, pull it back out, and tap it in a little more so that it stays in there pretty snug, otherwise it's just going to slip. Now the procedure to get this lock nut started is you're going to loosen the lock nut. So I already loosened it, so you're going to loosen it so that you're able to spin the center bolt, and you're going to raise it as high as it will go. All the way up until it stops. There you go, it stopped right there. Now if for some reason the nut ends up lower, make sure you raise the nut up so that it stays on the highest point, so it doesn't lock up on you as you're adjusting. There you go, it's pretty high. Otherwise, once you're adjusting, you're going to have to move it out of the way. Now with that being done, you're going to make a full rotation, one rotation only. There you go. And then after that, you're going to go however you want to go. You can go 1/8 or 1/4 at a time, slowly adjusting until you get the measurements we need. Also, one key point is this is supposed to be 5 millimeters. For some reason, maybe just mine or maybe others, a 5 millimeter doesn't fit in there, so I had to grind mine, and it ended up being close to 4.90. So I got it down to that, and now it fits perfect inside there. So don't just assume that a 5 is going to fit in there, and don't try to use one that wiggles in there, because you might end up messing the inside of the bolt and give yourself a lot of trouble. So it's better to grind one or to find one that fits snug, not loose. It has to fit snug in there. So this one, look how much it moves. Only a tiny bit it moves, but it's up to you. So now that I have it right now, it's in the middle. That flat part's facing up, at least for me. I don't know how yours is, or maybe all of them do this. So now we're going to put our tool, and the goal is to find out what the drag is off center. See, this way, without doing any adjustment, just the drag. So you're going to rotate it to your right and measure whatever your drag is. In this case, it's between 9 and 10. all the way to the right, and then go back to the center, and then you're going to measure what the drag is off center to the left now, 90 degrees. So this one's roughly maybe a couple of inch-pounds before, so you can write them down, or if you can remember, that's fine. So again, to the right. I know it's a little off center, but I don't think it matters that much as long as you have an idea of what you're getting. So here we go again. Around 9. And then go back to center. It's hard to keep it centered. Around 8. So that's your initial measurement. Now we have to add 4. Look at your book, or look at your information to make sure you're going along with whatever information you're comfortable. But now that you know the initial drag, we need to add anywhere from 4 to 8 inch-pounds to that drag. So because it was close to between 8 and 10, let's just assume it was 10. So if you add, let's say 6, then we have to go all the way to 16. Now, because this tool isn't as accurate as I would like it to be, at least you'll have an idea and something you can go off of when you do it and whatever you're comfortable. But so we're gonna start turning this, and it'll slowly start going up. For example, it might not do it for 3 or 4 adjustments, but then eventually it will go up. So I know that it's a few turns, so I'm not gonna take all that time to do it, but I'm gonna go to the point where it's gonna add some resistance and see where we're comfortable with it to be able to install it. So I'm gonna skip that, but just keep in mind that I will be turning it and then testing it. Turning this 1/8 or 1/4 inch and then testing it. So once I get to that point, then I'm gonna come back. Now here we go. I already gave it about 2 turns worth of testing at 1/8 of an inch, or at 1/8 of a turn as I'm turning it. So here we go. It's already starting to show more than 10 inch-pounds. So because it's not as accurate as I would want it to be, I'm gonna kind of pause right here and then install it on the vehicle, see what it does. If I don't like how it feels afterwards, then I'm gonna take it off and make more adjustments. Hopefully this helps you guys. But here we go. So it was slightly before 10 inch-pounds before. So here we go. I think it hit about 3/4, and then it goes down. That's to the right. Now we're gonna go to the left. About 18. It hits 20, and then goes back to almost 15. So I'm doing it slowly, and it's not hard. I'm just trying to get it to where you guys can see it. I'm also holding it with my knees to keep it in place. So here we go again, to the right. I know it's off center. Here we go again, and let's see if I can get it better for you guys. There you go. This one quickly went down again, but it hit, I want to say 18, 19. Now to the left. About 18. Then it goes down. So I'm gonna leave it there. Now this is where the lock nut ended up looking like. Might not look like yours, but this is where it ended up. So now that we have it there, you have to hold your Allen wrench and then tighten that without moving it from where it's at, because if it moves to the right, it'll end up giving you more inch-pounds and it'll mess up wherever you want to leave it at. And if the Allen wrench moves left, then it's gonna loosen. So you try to keep it in the same spot once you tighten it. And so you hold on the Allen wrench and then you turn it, and it's hard to do it with the and make sure you get it as tight as you can, not super tight, but torque, that is. So you can use a torque wrench. I don't remember what the number was, but I'm just going to do it where I feel like it's tight enough and leave it like that. There we go. So basically what you're doing right here is the two parts of this gear that touch together, the long gear that goes here, that's spirally right here, and it touches the gear on this side. You're basically trying to find a happy place between this and this. And so I really hope this helps some of you guys, because it has been driving me crazy for a couple of years and there was way too much play. This part wasn't the issue. It was more a spongy steering wheel as you're driving on the road. Now, do keep in mind that if you over tighten this, you're going to start feeling more sponginess. So when you turn this, once you get to that point where the measurements came out decent, if you need to adjust it, don't make huge adjustments. Try to make very small adjustments. I would even say a maximum of 1/8 of a turn, but I would even go a lot less than that. So maybe even a 1/16 when you're adjusting it. Go a tiny bit, tighten it up, and then try it, because you will get to a point where, or if you go past the point of adjustment, then the steering wheel will still feel off. It will feel like it's binding and it'll feel hard. It won't feel natural, and it'll just feel worse possibly than how it was before. At least that's how it was in my case, with when I attempted to do this same adjustments with an older one before I bought this one. So yep, there you go. Good luck to everyone.